Hello and welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. Today my guest, Brett Mentor. Brett is one of my best friends here locally in Squamish, someone that I have been actively deepening with for, I guess, a couple of years now. And today we honestly, what do we do together? We honestly really practice and celebrate like deeper levels of expression and meaning and just like really connection. Like, what does it mean to truly connect in life? And that's why I think he's become one of my closest friends. But today on the podcast, what we actually go through is Brett has had one of the most challenging years out of anyone I know personally this year. And we get to kind of touch on his transformation that's taken place through these challenges. Brett's a certified mountain guide, or he's on that path of becoming a certified mountain guide since he was like 20 years old. And this year he underwent some pretty difficult personal challenges, as well as witnessing death in our community and being quite intimate with that process, and how both of these experiences having to do with mountain culture, and how this has kind of shifted his relationship and his personal connection to spirit and what is meaningful and how he wants to proceed in his path. So we kind of get to dissect that, and he gets to share and express what he's been learning and the challenges that he's undergone. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, Brett.
Hey, buddy.
Welcome to the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. Do you know what we talk about on this podcast?
I know what we don't talk about.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what we don't talk about. What don't we talk about on this podcast?
We don't talk about politics.
Oh.
Or food.
Like food preferences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, we really haven't touched on those topics. So maybe one day we'll get there, but I don't know.
Maybe it's today.
But Brett, you have become one of my best friends. I met you pretty much immediately upon arriving in Squamish. And a little bit about your background, but you were from Colorado, moved to Canada, or I guess it's not Canada, but to Alaska when you were 20 to begin your certification and your journey with the mountains. You're currently at the tail end of getting your mountain certification. What is it called again? The Canadian Mountain Associate. What was it?
So it's the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, and there's 3 disciplines. There's ski guiding, rock guiding, and alpine guiding. And
right.
Within the 3 disciplines, once you complete them all, you become an international mountain guide.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, you which is also awesome because as a climber, we've climbed together. But the funny part is that's not really the core of our relationship at all. We barely climb together. And meeting you, my first actual image in my head is you dancing and drumming at one of the first events we ever hosted in Squamish, me and Lish. And you were just getting it. You're so in it. So it's a really vivid memory for me. But since then, we've grown a lot together. We've learned a lot together. We both stepped into like much deeper levels of expression in our lives. And the journey goes on. But you're on the show here today because I want to ask you about, I guess, your evolution in mountain culture, as well as you took the shamanic, what was it? What's the course? It's Shamanic Yoga Institute. You took what's the program called?
Yeah, it's a 300-hour yoga teacher training, specializing in shamanism, expressive arts, and yoga. Yeah.
And that's been a really important course for you, I know, especially in this last year where you've kind of encountered some of the biggest challenges you've had in your life. So we'll get to that. But you moved here at Alaska at age 20 and started your mountain journey. So maybe let's just start from the beginning, like where you come from and what has been kind of the driving force and how it's evolving. And that's kind of what I want to cover in today's podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, and just immersed in the team sports lifestyle. I had a pretty significant event when I was 16 years old, losing a partner to suicide, and that influenced me to seek therapy in the mountains. more therapy. And I've always been a snowboarder, and I've been snowboarding since I was 5. And I just really immersed myself fully in that when the accident happened when I was...
Into snowboarding?
I guess it wasn't an accident, but into snowboarding.
Yeah.
So I would skip school and I would drive my little car up and go snowboard on my own. And that just felt like the only thing that I could do to feel better about losing someone close to me. And that kind of changed my trajectory from pursuing being a professional athlete to guiding people and to look into more wilderness therapy. And that's
right. You talked a lot about how, like, growing up too, you come from, it's very competitive kind of attitude about the world.
Yeah, totally. Especially in team sports and trying to be the best. And I was always the best player on every single team I played for, and was coming early to practice and staying late after, and had a lot of competition between my older brothers, and there was a lot of physical experiences with them, with being a little kid and getting pushed around by them. That really fueled me to be a star, really. And,
right.
Yeah, and my relationship with my dad really has influenced everything a lot. He wasn't able to be in my life after I was 10 years old, just due to a lot of different circumstances. And that really fueled me to lean more into communication, and really just allowed me some opportunity to step into my sensitive side and to process some of those things. And I first came to Squamish when I was 19, and that really opened my eyes into what it's like to live in a different place, and to kind of get my travel bug started as well.
Right.
The year before, I'd spent immersed in the mountains teaching snowboarding to little kids. And so instead of pursuing the collegiate sports career and taking scholarships, I decided just to take a year off and to go snowboarding. And
it's the dream.
Yeah, it's influenced my life a lot. And so I actually came to Squamish to work with kids as well. And I was working at a camp here for children with disabilities. And so I learned a lot about empathy and communication, and how we can be sensitive and attentive to others' feelings. And I'm really appreciative of that experience.
Yeah. And I mean, today when I see you, and kind of over the last few years, it's like, I think that's something you helped me connect to, is just like the sensitivity of emotion almost. Because I don't feel like my old girlfriend used to always say I'm so insensitive. So it's something ever since then I've really wanted to deepen into, like, being more sensitive, but I don't think it comes naturally to me. But I've definitely improved in that capacity. Maybe that's part of your role in my life.
Totally. I think it's hard as men too in this world to really be open and to show our emotions. For me, I was taught to suppress them and to hide them, and that emotions were a sign of weakness. And now I have a completely opposite view, where I think that showing our emotions really is a sign of strength, and
do you think it's situational? Sometimes it's a sign of weakness, sometimes it's a sign of strength?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's very situational. And when I mention the sign of strength, I think it takes a lot to have emotional intelligence and have awareness. Right. And doesn't mean that we need to completely embody that and take on that emotion as our own identity, but to just have awareness, like, oh, that's sadness coming up. Okay. And just, or, oh, that's grief, or, ooh, this is joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the language,
identifying your emotion.
I think the language with English language, we have it kind of skewed, because when we're sad, we say, I am sad. So that is like us identifying as sadness. Instead of in other languages, it's like, I'm feeling sad, or I'm noticing sadness.
Right. Yeah.
Or I have sadness. Yeah.
Cool.
But in this moment, I'm feeling joy. A lot of joy.
Yeah. With your new hat.
Yeah. New hat. Just loving it. Thrift store.
Brett asked me before the podcast if he can wear his hat. I was like, hell yeah, you can wear that hat.
Yeah.
It's actually part of your Halloween costume, is it not?
No, I don't
Oh, it's
think
just
so.
an everyday hat.
Yeah, this is going to be an everyday hat.
Sick. Okay.
Yeah, it brings me joy.
Yeah, and it looks really warm.
It's really warm. So it might be a bit too warm for this room, but I think I'm going to keep it on.
Yeah, because we don't know what's going on under there, under your hat there.
No, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's for the second podcast.
Yeah. Cool. So you're kind of at this stage now. I know in the last, you've just, gradually been working. It's a 10-year journey so far for you, and like getting your certification as a fully certified mountain guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you've even questioned not completing it in the last year, hesitation, like, oh, maybe forget it. Tell me about just mountain culture. So I know you've expressed so much. You love the mountains, but it's the mountain culture that seems to perpetuate some of the old attitudes you've had about growing up with competitive and trying to win. And I know that's still a huge part of the culture in Squamish and just the Lower Mainland in British Columbia, like. Still, like Whistler is our local mountain, and like some of the best athletes in the world in like outdoor are here. So I know it's a staple in the culture. And yeah, tell me about your relationship with the mountains, like how it's developed.
So yeah, as a young buck, I was just always so competitive and never really have left the athlete mindset. When I was 20, I got an opportunity as an intern at a brand new heli ski company in Alaska. So helicopter skiing is a private lodge, one helicopter, maybe max 16 clients. And so very high end. And I had this in my vision since I was 16, 17, through that time of transition in my life where I really felt called to go and ride and snowboard in big mountains. And I was watching films and I was like, oh man, that's amazing. And then I started to research and I realized that all those athletes were being guided. So I was like, okay, that seems like a good job for me to go and guide. And yeah, I was 20 and I was just calling it in and got an internship. And then sure enough, I was packing my bags to go up to Alaska for my first time. And I had a few certifications that allowed me to go up there and help out in the field. So a few avalanche courses and medical courses, and I'd been a snowboard instructor. So I had some skills and I basically signed up to do whatever for the company. It was very low pay, but it's all about the experience. And so I was washing dishes, I was shoveling snow, I was driving people from the airport, I was fueling the helicopter. And then all of a sudden when seats would pop up, they would ask me if I wanted to go and learn more about the guiding process and what happens in the field. And actually a weather anomaly happened that first year. So there was basically like 30 to 40 days of perfect blue skies and sun. So we just were skiing so much, and we had a couple guides that were injured. And so there was an opportunity for me to step up and actually guide my first season as a 20-year-old. And that just does not happen regularly, especially in Canada. Alaska has a bit of a different process where it's a little bit more, just a little bit looser on who can guide. And in Canada, where we're at now, it's very strict and there's a process you need to go through. So there I was guiding, just having the time of my life and embracing every moment. And I really just identified so much as this heli ski guide, especially when the season ended. I walked around and I wore my jacket with the patch on it. And
so what is that identity? Develop that identity for me. I'm this what do you call it? Heli ski guide.
Yeah. It was just like people come over from around the world to ride big Alaska mountains, and I was the one guiding them.
They're paying like 10 grand.
Yeah. Very expensive. Yeah. And there's a lot of, like, I was in really big terrain, like stuff that could really hurt you. It's avalanches and crevasses and, oh man, there's so many hazards. And I was just a little bit naive, like a little bit ignorant, but no one got hurt and finished that season. And then the operation gave me a few certifications to go get to come back again. And so I basically started planning my whole year around going back to Alaska for these 3 months because it's just what I loved.
Right.
I bought a little camper van and just cruised around. And that's when I also was still coming back to Squamish for the summers and just really embracing the outdoor lifestyle and just had a thirst for more. and started the path of the guiding certifications, which actually encompasses a few different organizations and hoops to jump through. And you have to get experience both working and on your own. That takes time, and it takes money and energy, and to continue to level up in that process. So I did most of my certifications here in Canada because that's where the best, this is the best industry here to do it in the world. And the just highest level of teachings are here.
Why is that? Just because we have really good mountains here?
This is the highest concentration of ski guiding operations in the world is in Canada, especially in British Columbia. There's tons of heli ski lodges, ski touring lodges. It's just a really big industry here.
Right.
At the same time, I was meeting so many amazing Canadians. I really wanted to live here. So it was a good way to continue to stay here. Before I got residency, I ended up having 7 different work visas and was plugging away at my certifications. And
so what's the culture like here? Mountain guiding.
The culture here is, just to kind of come back in the mountain culture, there's lots of different mountains in the world. And with my experience from the culture in Alaska and then here in British Columbia, there's a lot of play, a lot of playfulness. We go in the mountains here to play, not as much to pray. And there's not as much spirituality. And it's more, let's go conquer the mountain. Let's go ski this line and be rad. And there's a lot more of that than...
be a badass.
Yeah, be a badass. And obviously skiing and snowboarding in itself is a pretty privileged sport. Only few people in the world get to experience it because it's expensive and it takes a lot of gear. And then you take backcountry skiing, which even requires even more gear and skill and money. So that's even more privileged. And so I'm guiding this niche here. So I see a very specific group of people. And in Canada, it seems like, skiing is a way of life. So it's really beautiful to see how people, spend their winters just deep in the mountains and finding that recreation and that exercise. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I also left me craving some more depth. And what I realized when I was in Alaska is that people have a lot of different reasons why they came up there. And ultimately, I was facilitating adults to play. That's what they wanted to do, is they just wanted to go up and play. And that's what skiing is. You're cruising down fresh snow, and it's play. It's laughter. It's joy, which is really beautiful. And the ski culture and the mountaineering kind of climbing culture, there's subtle differences. The mountaineering climbing culture here, especially where we live in Squamish, doesn't replicate the ski culture. There's a little bit of a difference there. And the climbing culture here, there seems like there's, more people that really want to live simply, meaning they just, sleep in their car and eat food and go climbing. And that's kind of it. It can be less expensive too to get into. And also it's very similar. Climbing is just playing, you want to go and play.
That's why I climb.
Yeah. You like play.
I like play, but I also go into loops where I really push hard and try and take it not more seriously, but I actually have to work hard to get some objective sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I'll have to come back to myself if I make sure I'm actually having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good thing to check into constantly. And I think that's where I thrived as a guide, because I am very playful and I love to have fun. And that's when I'm at my best, is when I can facilitate fun and I can remind the group that we're here to have fun.
And I agree that fun is such an important part of it. What was it you were mentioning earlier, the subtleties of the spirituality between it and versus just let's go play? What is the difference? What are you talking about?
So when I was in Alaska, I was just so drawn to wild, remote places. We'd fly and get dropped off and there'd be no one for hundreds of miles, and we'd be skiing and playing way out there, and we'd have the space to be free. And I just felt so much freedom. And it wasn't until the last few years that I realized what I was seeking. And I was seeking a chapel, an area to where I can radiate fully from my center into the universe. And I feel really trapped when I'm in closed spaces or cities or where there's a lot of people around. And so that's what I was drawn to. And so for me, I've realized that I've done profound healing in the work that I've been doing. And a lot of it's been I didn't really know what I was doing. I just was drawn to wild places. And I've spent a life seeking deeper places to go and more solitude. And now I've realized that there's this combination of like, yes, going out to play and then also going to pray as well and connect to nature and connect to my higher self. Yeah.
I mean, and is that even something you have to do in the mountains? It's like, I also like going to the mountains and stuff, but for me, what I'm also realizing is I don't have to go anywhere to form that connection. Like it's becoming more, I have more, I can explore that connection within myself without having to go out on some epic.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I mean, it's all comes back to this flow state that we're craving. And so a lot of people wanted to come, and because skiing is a really beautiful flow state. So is climbing.
Totally.
You know what else is?
Dancing. Sex. Oh, it's right. Dancing.
Sex as well.
Sex.
Dancing, music, eating can be too. Yeah. So I've realized too that I can tap into flow states that I crave, that I'm really addicted to these flow states. And, you know, I've been able to find those in other places now, which has made me really feel like more complete. And I didn't have to walk miles and miles and miles to get up somewhere remote to experience the flow state. I could do it.
How would you describe a flow state? What is it?
Complete presence in the moment.
Yeah.
Where our mind almost disintegrates, our thoughts disintegrate, and we're living truly like in the moment, present, heart-centered, flowing.
Right. Yeah. I think that's pretty much how I would describe it too. Yeah, I like to describe it like and that's why challenge is necessary. It's like if something is not engaging enough or too easy, it's like my mind still can drift. So when I pick when I use rock climbing, because that's what I do right now is my core outlet for physical. Yeah, when it has to be stimulating enough to my difficulty level that I have to be present. But it can't be too hard that I'm not actually able to get into momentum. Like in climbing, I just fall. If I can't do the climb, I'll just fall, and then you're out of flow.
Yeah.
Whereas like the perfect climb is like when you actually send the climb, and it's like 30 minutes of like full effort, full presence, and like everything is just mechanically working perfectly without thought required, because it's all energetically like programmed into the movement because you've trained and all that stuff. And then you just have full on flow state and you're in love.
Yeah. And I really like that you bring climbing into this, because climbing, I think, has the beautiful combination of the three components of kind of recreation or sport, if you will.
Right.
And that's technical, physical, and mental.
Yeah. And one's always restraining you.
Yeah. So, and then there's also subtly different types of climbing that require a little bit more of each. Sport climbing or bouldering would require more physical. Mountaineering might require less, like just more mental and technical skill. Or trad climbing, for instance.
Yeah, especially because I think I'd categorize like safety considerations really escalate, and I'd probably categorize that into mental. You have to really think through things really well.
Yep, and then also have the technical skill to use the appropriate gear in the certain places. So you kind of train those three different entities. So physical training, which is pretty straightforward, but how do we train mentally and to get ourselves ready for those challenges? And then technical training does take time. It takes experience to get yourself geared up, ready for those objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting in climbing. I know so many like super strong climbers that have no mental game, right? Like they definitely should be able to climb this thing and they can't.
Yeah.
And then someone who's way weaker can.
So how do you train your mental game?
I think by just, by trying new things, really. Trying new things and trying, even though it's like a lot of the time, like things are in rock climbing and the type of climbing I do, especially like mostly sport climbing, a lot of the time you are actually safe. And if you have a good partner and belayer and everything, you are safe. but your mind might not actually feel safe, but that doesn't mean you're not safe. So I think knowing that, I'm able to try and push through. I can push through that mental block because I know that I actually am safe. It's safe to fall. And I think, using that kind of framework, you can apply that to anything, like whether it's business or whatever. It's like, it's safe to fall. It's safe to fail. And it's so counterintuitive. Like, it sounds funny. I think I said it to you earlier at breakfast, like we were talking about death, and I was like, death is safe. It's safe to die. It's part of it's a totally natural part of life. But how we associate with safety is such an interesting consideration.
Yeah, and I think it brings up the topic of risk in general.
Yeah.
And there's inherent risks with everything we do. We walk out the door, we cross the road, there's risk. We get in our car or get on the highway, there's risk. There's inherent risk. And it's just,
but we don't identify with it like that, really.
It's normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we get off the ground on a rock climb or about to enter a big slope to ski, we're like,
you've normalized the risk.
You can start to, but when you're first starting, that's why there is a lot of stickiness and takes a lot of, it feels really challenging because we're more like face to face with that risk.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're putting yourself out there and yeah. Well, I think this leads in quite nicely into the year that you are currently in. So at the start of this year, and maybe a little bit before, I guess in 2021, you started your yoga teacher training with the Shamanic Yoga Institute. And that's a year-long process. And I was part of something similar through the Shamanic Yoga Institute as well. But that was one of the significant things that I know you've been doing for the last 12 months. And the two other extremely important life events that happened this year, I know, which you've been dealing with and shifting with and transforming yourself with, is you were yourself in an avalanche and almost died, which was terrifying for you especially, but the whole community. And someone close to us and really close to you, you witnessed them in a fatal accident. And maybe we can lead into that because we're talking about risk. Tell us about your year, man.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to find ways to kind of summarize the experience I've been having. I feel like I could be here for hours sharing.
And I didn't want to bring you on the podcast a couple months ago because you were so deeply in process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I feel like I got a better understanding and grasp, but essentially I said yes to stepping into a shamanic program that allowed me space to continue to deepen my yoga practice, which has been with me, for 10 plus years, and to learn more about those lineages, and then also step into the teachings of mountain shamanism, which were really impactful and something that I've been always interested in. And then also the expressive arts is another component of that training, which has been really amazing for me to explore expression. I'm a very expressive person and an artist, really. So I started that program, and it's separated into 4 different chunks, and it's based on the cardinal directions of the medicine wheel. And the first direction was the south. And in the south, it's the archetype is the serpent. And it's all about shedding old skin and
healing,
really. And throughout my journey, and I shared a little bit to start, but I've been on quite a big healing journey with relationships, with family, with myself. And the mountains have been quite a beautiful environment for me to heal. And yet I'm always craving more and more depth. So I did the first part of the program, and it was just really beautiful. And I called in a lot of change, and I called in some dissolving of my ego, which I mentioned earlier is a big part of the guiding culture, is to have that kind of badge. Like I'm a guide, that's who I am. And so I called in all these things and started getting more skilled at praying, and stepping into really my medicine shoes. And to step into those, we need to do a lot of healing in our own way. So after that first experience, I actually had taken week off of ski guiding, and I was in the busiest time of my year. I was working almost every day, mostly ski touring here on the coast, and it was very physical, long days, lots of ups and downs. And I took some time to started that program, and I took a couple days off afterwards and was pretty moved and just had a really deep integrating experience. And a few days after, probably about a week after that first part of the program, I was in a mountain range close to Squamish, and you access it via helicopter. And I had 10 clients with me and an apprentice guide. So I was making a lot of decisions.
You're the lead guide then.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And so a lot of responsibility, especially when you're dealing with helicopters and, providing a product for people. There's a lot of expectations and, a lot of money on the line. So I was trying to provide a good product, and we had an epic ski day. It was one of the best days of the whole year. Lots of new snow and blue skies. And it had taken us a few days to actually fly into this zone because of the weather. So we finally get up there and we're having this mega, mega good day. Vibes were high. And there was this one specific feature that I've skied actually a couple times. And there was another group that was actually out that was not related to us. And they had actually climbed this feature and skied it. So there's 4 ski tracks, and, our group's kind of looking at that and kind of like, oh, that looks really fun. And after lunch, we decided that there was some people that didn't want to go ski that. And so instead of climbing the face, we actually went around the back. And we went around the back, and there's actually a small ridge feature on the backside that I had to take out my rope and belay some people up to the top where we dropped in. And, I'm working really hard. I'm moving fast. I'm also exhausted. It's been a long season, and I'm just giving it all I had. And I noticed I was rushing. And part of the program, the yoga teacher training, was to have just more awareness and to use the breath and use those skills. And I remember in the moment having this experience of noticing my breath and noticing my intensity, and, just didn't want the clients to wait, and really was feeling comfortable skiing in that terrain. And yeah, so I clicked my skis on super fast, and everyone was sitting there watching on the top of the ridge, and I made 2 turns, and then the entire slope ripped out from underneath me, about 50 meters across, 200 plus meters down. And immediately when the whole thing ripped out, all the snow, it's probably about 150 centimeters deep of snow. So we're talking a lot of snow. And so the whole slope started moving as I'm on top of it. And then basically what started happening was the snow starts to tumble. I started to tumble. I was upside down, right side up. Ski came off. There was snow in my helmet, my goggles, everything just tumbling, like if I was in a laundry machine kind of thing.
Right.
And I've experienced avalanches before. Been around them. I've been close to them. I've been in small ones, and that was like the biggest I've ever experienced. And yeah, it was very scary. I tried to pull my arms back to try to swim to stay on the surface. And actually injured my shoulder pretty badly in that process. And fortunately, I wasn't buried. I ended up on the surface, which is extremely lucky. And I immediately okay, I'm on the surface, and I was like, yes, okay, great, I'm not buried, because that's one of my biggest fears, is being buried. And we do train our clients, and we have a whole protocol and all the avalanche rescue equipment in case of a burial. And so fortunately, I was on the surface, and I had some shoulder pain, but my adrenaline was pumping so much that I was just like, okay, what's next? And I radio called the rest of the group, who had just watched the whole experience from the top, let them know I was okay, and then I proceeded to find my ski. The group was able to ski down the backside and meet me back at this hut we were staying at. And I tried so hard to hold it together for everyone, as the leader, as the decision maker, as the expert, and I just broke down. It was just felt a lot of grief and sadness.
Then and there or later?
Right then and there, yeah, because I was really sorry. I was embarrassed. I had shame. Like I'm the man. I'm supposed to keep everyone safe. And I was also so grateful that it wasn't anyone else, like that it was me.
Yeah.
And we made the decision to fly everyone out. And the group had a really nice debrief at the river in town. And fortunately, there was a few doctors and nurses in the group, so they were able to check me out. The way that the medical process here in Squamish, or in Canada in general, takes a while to get checked out. So it took me a while. And yeah, I remember messaging some friends and seeking some support, but that's where a huge shift happened for me. I was really, really shaken up. Not only physically, just my body and the injury that ended up being really significant, but my emotional state and just my whole identity, identifying that as this expert that's been doing this for so long, that's there in charge to make good sound decisions, all the training I've done, all the snow science workshops I've been in and training courses. So that was a huge hit. And
when was January?
April 6th.
Oh, it was in April. Okay.
April 6th. Yeah. So kind of right at the end of the season, there was still probably, 30 days left. And there was a lot of serendipity with just the timing of everything. And so I was immediately like, okay, like my season's over. It's getting checked out. And now I needed to navigate some heavy trauma, because that's what it was. It was trauma. So reaching out for all my support networks, and yeah, it was quite the journey. It still is quite the journey, and just allowing myself to feel all that arises. And what mistakes did I make? What can I do differently? All those things kind of come into mind. And so I definitely reached out to experts in the field and tried to have those conversations. But I also just like sat in the dark in my house, just in shame, and like was in tears, and just, still like shaken. Like my body was traumatized by that event.
Right.
And, the summer kind of started slowly coming, and there's a lot of friends around and certain things that I involved myself in to help. And that healing process and journey was not easy by any means. There's a lot of different things that I was unable to do just with my shoulder injury and just my emotional state. To navigate that, it was a huge moment for me in my life, really significant change. And that's exactly what I was calling in, actually. And it actually,
that's what that's what the shamanic yoga program is all about, is transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Changing our relationship to life, our relationship to ourselves,
mm-hmm.
our relationship to spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's like the weird how we call things in.
Yeah. So I had this shift in this process afterwards where I was like, wasn't just like some freak accident that happened. This was spirit giving me a message. And this was an opportunity for me to listen. And so what was it saying? It was saying that I needed to slow down, and I needed to recalibrate, and I actually needed to take time to really feel into what I'm in alignment with. And it's been so beautiful to actually surrender to that, and to honor that this was a process that needed to happen for me to be able to grow into my highest self. So that shift happened, and I was able to kind of come to like a little bit better conclusions for myself, and with support of others, and then able to actually continue on into that teacher training. And I was pretty nervous to continue to go, because I wasn't sure what was going to come afterwards, and how much these shifts are as a result of me being in that program. Right. And so I tried to stay humble and to be open to teachings, and trying to honor all the processes and honor that trajectory. And so,
what are some of the teachings from the program that really helped you through?
A big one is just how to create sacred space, whether it's for myself or holding it for others. So processes to create that space. So clearing energy, and creating an altar. Just the mechanisms behind praying for me was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Calling in spirit. is like the biggest thing, calling in spirit to ask spirit to come and join me in this moment and to help me and to guide me. And I think that's been the biggest transformation. And yes, the yoga has been beautiful as far as the asana goes to transform and help my body in that energy field. And also
it's like the physical side, but then there's like the inner mental, like what is the intention that I'm actually asking for?
Yeah.
And knowing that there's support that's non-human that's ready to help.
Yeah. And this commitment to spirit that we make, you know, as we commit to spirit and spirit commits to us, and this reciprocity that we build. So
what is spirit to you?
Spirit is the just underlying essence of everything. It's this this unexplainable, energetic essence.
Yeah, I know you can't capture it fully, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've never been really religious or would identify as spiritual, and yet all these teachings have reminded me that my connection to something greater has always been there. It's just was a beautiful way to actually label it and call it what it is, and to know that there are different ways to explain these unexplainable things. Yeah. And a big part of the training was also the community, and to not only have these different practices to use as tools, but to also be seen and witnessed by others in this transformation process. That was important for me, because it'd be really hard to do all this work on my own.
It's actually, I've touched on this in previous podcasts, but like I've really anchored into the importance of being seen. I very much undervalued that part of expression for a long time, but like when things are seen authentically and fully, there is a release. There's something important about it when you're really seen in yourself. And especially if we're expressing like, our trauma, and somebody and people be able to hold safe, sacred space and see it fully, and then say, I see you and I accept you, and something changes. There's something about the charge that releases and transforms it.
Absolutely. And I've been fearful of fully expressing myself a lot in my life, and this has given me the skills and tools to make good analysis of the situation, if it's safe for me to share, and also asking for support. And so, there I was after this traumatic event, continuing this program and being able to communicate my experience with others, especially close ones that, were also traumatized by this event for me. And I was able to communicate with them and go through processes to help each other.
I mean, and then you started a men's group, like pretty much around that time.
Yeah.
I think you had you started the men's group yet? Locally
No, it was just like something that came to me after the avalanche that like I needed.
I need this. And then you started it, and you took initiative on it, and it was a fascinating experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like, that was kind of I think you really started to step into like change, and like, okay, my life is changing, my perspectives are changing, and you were going through a lot of difficulty with that transition. And of course, lots of beautiful lessons come through that difficulty. And then Andrew, then you watched Andrew die, or not die, but like you went through that very difficult experience. And when did that happen again?
So that was July 18th. So I had done the direction of the west and the north, and had lots of experiences in between those with friends and community, and, was really listening to what I was being called to. And so on that day, I was coming back from the city, and I was feeling called to check in with Andrew. Like, hey, what are you up to today? I know he was just sick for a little bit, and so I was being called. He's like, oh, we're just out climbing. And I'm like, oh, climbing. Like, I've spent so much of my summer.
And you couldn't climb at that point.
Couldn't climb. I didn't even want to be around it really because I just was like craving to go climbing. And so only day of the summer, I was like, okay, I'll go hang out while you guys climb. That sounds like a good day. So I went and got myself a nice big burrito. And normally when I'm out climbing, I'll bring a pack with layers and a first aid kit and lots of different things. And because I'm usually in a leadership role. And so in this case, I was like, had a little basket and I had my mesa, which is like my kind of portable altar there, and a burrito and some water. And that's really all I brought. And I went to hang out with this crew of friends that were climbing. And I'd never climbed with them before, so I didn't know their experience levels. And I take climbing really seriously when I'm in a leadership role. There's lots of different things that need to happen, and communication and technical skill. But when I went to hang out with them, I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna hang out, turn off my brain. These guys know what they're doing. Made some assumptions there. So, and yeah, it's a pretty chill day. We were like just hanging out, having a really good time. And there was a specific climb that our friend Andrew went to go climb, and there was like a group of 4 of us that were just chilling, eating snacks, like a little bit further away, not really like more like shouting distance. And so he proceeds to start up this climb, and I've done the climb like a bunch of times. It's a really high quality climb, and it's a crack climb, and you put your natural protection not natural protection, but your own gear in the rock. Instead of there being bolts you already pre-clip, like you already clip.
Yeah, so your traditional climbing.
Yeah. And he had gotten up off the ground, and I wasn't really paying attention. None of us were really paying too far attention. And he just basically didn't place enough protection and slipped. And he came down quite a distance, right to his head, like just slammed. And I remember that moment, like just watching the whole thing. And yeah, it was loud and it was really intense. And there was just like this kind of shattering, ground shaking moment. And, I just can replay that fall quite a bit in my head. And I did what I'm trained to do as far as a first responder goes, and to get him stable and to call for help, because we didn't have what we needed there. His injuries were pretty severe, so we called for external help, and I was able to assist as much as I could with the things that I could do. And then paramedics came, and I helped them bring him into the ambulance. And then I followed the ambulance to the hospital, and he had to be flown via helicopter to Vancouver, and he had some significant head injuries. And so I remember I was like shirtless, and as I used my clothes for first aid, and didn't know where my phone was, but I was just like with the other friends, and we were just in shock and just holding each other, and adrenaline's pumping. So we went down to the city and waited in the ICU, and they eventually stabilized him. And like a little over a week went by, and we visited him every day and just tried to make his room as cozy and natural as possible. And we did a lot of different spiritual shamanic practices in that room with him for healing. And he was in a coma, and he ended up not making it out the other side. And so having witnessed both the accident and him deteriorating in the ICU is very traumatic. Another component of that was being with his loved ones, his partner and his family, and watching that. And I was just trying my best to hold space, and just had so many questions, like why, like I was there, and what is Spirit telling me right now, and what are the bigger lessons out of this whole thing. So I did my best with what I could, and it was also just really, really hard, just a really hard experience. And to go, have these 2 different traumatic experiences in the 2 things I really love is like just so heartbreaking.
And mountain skiing, and then mountain climbing.
Yeah. So that process has been a lot different than my own process, because there's a bit more of a collective atmosphere with that incident and collective grieving. And I'm still in that right now. And I think the combo of the two have left me in a really vulnerable, tender state in my life. The last part of kind of the timeline was I finally got cleared to get surgery for my damaged shoulder.
From the original avalanche.
From the original avalanche after I completed the program. So there's Andrew's accident, and then I did the final stage of the program, which was really heavy. And then a week later, I got cleared to have shoulder surgery, which basically put me on the couch for 6 weeks, not able to move.
Yeah.
And during those 6 weeks, I couldn't do anything else besides
be with yourself.
Be with myself and like ruminate over all these experiences, all these like visuals that were just coming into my sphere. And I have a lot of processes and helpful tools, and yet it was still just so challenging.
So like normally when I need to do some reflection, I literally like I have to schedule it and like get myself out of the rat race that I've put myself in, and like pause my business and like go and like get a cabin somewhere and do some reflection work. You're pretty much just completely forced into it from every which way. And what have you been learning? What are you learning? What's shifted? And I don't know. I guess how do you want to move forward? But I guess what are the biggest insights from all this happening? Now you've had some time, I think. I know you're still in it right now. What are some of the clear insights, or are there any clear insights by this point?
I've definitely gained some clarity in a lot of different things in my life, some that were unrelated to these incidents.
Just by stepping back fully from everything.
Yeah. My relationship with my job, with my career, there's a lot of clarity on that. It's like I've got some big signs that the trajectory I was on wasn't in my alignment. And I still want to be in the mountains, and I still want to guide others. And yet I have a new vision of what that looks like, which is really beautiful for me.
How would you describe some of that?
More depth. Yeah, less conquer the mountain kind of experiences, and more depth and more healing. And I want to partner with different people so we can do some deep healing work for folks while we play in the mountains. My other big learning was just how grateful I am for so many different things in my life. For the community that was around me, for my body and its ability to heal, for my ability to love and care for others, and also my commitment to spirit. And this is just a really great opportunity to surrender to my spiritual path.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does that mean, to surrender to the spiritual path?
It's like once these experiences have happened, I didn't have a choice but to honor them for exactly how they are in my journey. Right. And all of these profound feelings and experiences have solidified this greater essence in this like cosmic path that is already set out for me. And in the program, I was learning a lot about Dharma and purpose. And it's just so serendipitous that I had these experiences that allowed me opportunities for clarity in my Dharma and my purpose.
Yeah, it sure doesn't feel like that in it, does it?
No, I was really upset. I was like, why did this happen? These were big mistakes. Wasn't supposed to be this way. And this surrender is almost like this exhale, like this is how it's supposed to be. This is what's supposed to happen. And once I surrendered to that and stopped resisting it, all the learnings and teachings just kept flowing, and I was able to heal more.
Yeah, and I think it's so like, it's so hard to accept it sometimes, because like even just the wording of it, it's like when these things that are seemingly awful, both on an individual level but also collectively, how can this be what's supposed to happen? And many people, depending on who you're talking to, could very much argue against any of it, being like, no, this is not how it's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. And yet it is the way it is happening. Mm-hmm. It's like this deep surrendering to accepting the present moment. This is what happened, mm-hmm. and therefore I accept it because this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. That's super hard for many people. Yeah. And even me, I think it used to be really hard. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely eased my level of trust in the way things are is a lot more secure. Mm-hmm. And so it's rather than questioning what happens, you can look for the lessons. It happened, so it was meant to happen, and therefore, why? What are we learning from this? Mm-hmm. Even if it's not the easy lesson, which it seldomly is, the easy lesson, especially in your year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just loving all of the experiences.
Yeah. You talked about, like, I liked that at the start of at breakfast, just like gathering more aspects of yourself is what you felt you've been doing this year.
Yeah.
Becoming more whole by accepting all these different aspects, even if they're not the positive aspects. It's like accepting your shame, accepting your guilt, accepting whatever.
And loving it.
And yeah, even and beyond accepting is loving it, the next step.
Yeah. And I've been holding back on letting all of me show up in this world. And there's like a few different reasons why I've been holding that back. And now with this surrender, this letting go, I'm allowing all parts of me to equally exist. And it's like as if I have a massive sphere around me with all my parts, all my experiences, and I'm allowing them all to be in that sphere. I'm not blocking anything, not hiding anything. There's no blind spots. And I'm letting all these experiences just dissolve so I can be present.
How does that feel?
Feels like joy. Feels whole.
So why don't we do that? Why is that not common behavior?
It's a good question.
Why weren't you doing it before then? Why don't we do it? It's like such a
yeah, I think parts we hold on to our wounds and we identify with our wounds and defense mechanisms, and we define ourselves by our experiences, and we often create a container of self, which we call the ego, and the ego builds and limits other beliefs from coming in, and really like channels this belief system that this is who we are and what we are,
and then projects it
to others. And not saying that like I don't have an ego now, but I have more awareness of it.
For sure.
And this orb that's dissolving all these experiences has helped me in my relationship with who I am. Because it's no longer what I do. This like guide, this mountain guy is like, I am everything.
Yeah. I want to end right there.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man.
Having the space.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I wasn't sure if we'd get you on here this year.
Yeah.
Because definitely originally when I was like, oh, I should have Brett on, and you were just like, I'm doing terrible. And I was like, maybe you should come on just doing terrible.
Yeah.
But it is nice seeing you coming back to your joy and deepening into like some super meaningful relationships right now is what I'm watching you do, and which is nice because I think when we're in a neutral state or even a joyous state, we can have a lot of clarity on the insights that we've gathered. Anyway, thank you for sharing everything. And yeah, you want a hug, buddy?
Yeah. Aho.
Aho. Oh.